Hello and welcome to today's Take, hosted by me, Jane Azzopardi, the podcast that goes beyond the headlines to give you the story behind the story that you see on TV. And this week we are heading to London for the story that caused probably my favourite headline of the year, the Prince, formerly known as Andrew.
We'll begin with that breaking news from Buckingham Palace, which has confirmed Prince Andrew will be stripped of his prince title and forced to leave Royal Lodge.
He's not having such a good weekend. Let's go live to 9 Europe correspondent Mimi Becker in London. Mimi, this is a big shift.
Good morning, Carl and Sarah. It is. It's a big shift and it's a significant moment in royal history. Buckingham Palace confirming that Prince Andrew will no longer be a prince and will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The statement went on to say that formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease of Royal Lodge and he will move to alternative private accommodation. Andrew is understood to have not objected to the King's decision for his prince title to be removed or to force him out of Royal Lodge, that 30-room mansion.
Well, Nine's Europe correspondent Jessica Millwood has been following every twist and turn of this saga, and she joins me now from London. Jess, welcome to today's Take.
Thank you, Jane.
Now, as far as royal scandals go, this one has got to be right up there.
I mean, in my 2 short years being in London, we've had a lot of royal stories between the King's cancer, Kate's cancer, Harry just being Harry, and now this with Prince Andrew. Safe to say the Prince Andrew saga has drawn out, and this really was the culmination of all of that. But this is extraordinary, in many ways unprecedented, and royal experts who have been around the traps for decades can't believe that the King actually made the move in the end.
Yeah, I've got to say it shocked me, and we are going to talk about that and the reasons behind it, but we are going to go right back to the beginning here because I want to remind everyone just how this story started. So we really need to go back to the turn of the century, 1999-2000, because that is when the Prince, formerly known as Prince Andrew, met a man called Jeffrey Epstein. Jess, what do we know about their friendship?
Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, as he is now known, just a mere commoner. That's right. He has said numerous times that he only met Jeffrey Epstein through his friendship with Ghislaine Maxwell. So he says he met him around 1999 to 2000. We know that by 2000 he was having Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein come to Sandringham, come to Windsor. There were photos of them taken at Ascot together. He hosted Ghislaine Maxwell's birthday party at Windsor, although he says that was just a shooting weekend, nothing more than a shooting weekend. And then we know in the years since he travelled to Jeffrey Epstein's properties in the US, including in Florida, several times. By 2001, he's meeting Virginia Giuffre. In 2010, that infamous Central Park picture was taken, and that was so significant because that was after Jeffrey Epstein had been charged. That is why it was so damning, that image that most of us have seen now of Prince Andrew, then Prince Andrew, walking through Central Park with Jeffrey Epstein. He was staying at his property in New York at the time. So back then, before a lot of the allegations from Virginia Giuffre came forward, that was clear that this was a massive lapse in judgment by Prince Andrew, but they ran in the same circles for around a decade.
So you referenced that photo. That came after Epstein was convicted of these child prostitution offences. So Andrew sort of photographed walking with him a year or so after that. At the time, how was that photograph received?
Was the front page of all the tabloid papers and front and centre headlines everywhere. As I say, it was at the very best a lapse in judgment. At the worst, he was complicit in what Jeffrey Epstein had been tried and convicted of, and that is why it was so damning. Why wasn't, the second son to the Queen keeping his distance from this man? That was the massive question. What on earth are you doing?
So at that point, it's about his friendship with somebody who was convicted of these awful offences. But it's not until later that we get those first allegations from the woman, Virginia Giuffre, who says that she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and forced to have sex with people, including Prince Andrew. I mean, that was a bombshell.
Absolutely was. And, the plenty of programs, and I know that there's one that you've referenced that that TV episode, A Very Royal Scandal. It goes into that first moment when Prince Andrew's media advisor comes to him and says, look, there's allegations being made, there's a photograph. Virginia Roberts, as she was known back then, had come forward with these allegations, and then they really snowballed, and it became very clear that Prince Andrew, it wasn't just a lapse in judgment in terms of choosing a friend. This may have been something more. And, you know, we have these conversations and we have to point out that he denies all the allegations against him and he hasn't been charged with anything. But in terms of being tried in the court of public opinion, that's been dragged out over many, many years.
It sort of seems though, Jess, like at the time after those first allegations came out from Virginia Giuffre, you know, it seemed embarrassing for Andrew. There were some terrible headlines for Andrew, but you know, it didn't seem to really. I mean, he came through it sort of largely unscathed compared to what's happened since. Do you think that's a fair assessment of how it was received at the time?
Yes, I think if you asked any member of the public, I think 9 times out of 10 people here would have said, look, not great, not a great look. But as long as you have the Queen, the monarch, who is so dearly loved, backing him in, and, you know, Andrew was always called the Queen's favourite son, and it didn't matter what happened. Behind the scenes, we're told, the Queen always supported him and backed him until, of course, 2019, and that was a whole different story. But as long as he had the backing of his mother, that, in terms of Andrew's thoughts, was all that mattered.
So by 2019, Jeffrey Epstein is arrested again and he kills himself in prison. And it's at that point there where Prince Andrew gives that, well, I mean, I can only call it a train wreck, that interview that he gave with the BBC. You mentioned that TV series that I watched recently, A Very Royal Scandal, which goes into the whole saga, the ins and outs of that interview. But I mean, I remember watching that interview on the BBC and he's saying, oh, that couldn't have happened because I was at Pizza Express, and oh, that her account can't be true because I don't sweat. Like, it was, anybody who watched that interview, you know, he didn't come off well.
There's that series, and then there's also the fantastic movie called Scoop. And why they're so fascinating is because, yes, a lot of normal people are sitting at home going, oh, this is awful. But what's fascinating is in the room, he and his advisors seem to think it went so well. And the journalists in the room, and you and I have been in this situation, are sitting there thinking, this is extraordinary. What is he doing? He's putting his foot in it repeatedly. But he thought it went well, and they thought that up until it was released, and then it was very clear he never said sorry. You know, that reiterating the fact that he would remember the night he went to Pizza Express at Woking because that was so unusual for him. I don't go to Woking, you know. Woking is a lower socioeconomic place here in the UK. So even the fact he laboured on that point, he was so unrelatable. It was a train wreck. It was the beginning of the end, really.
So that interview was back in 2019, and it was sort of, you know, in the years after that, that then Prince Andrew settled the lawsuit with Virginia Giuffre. So this is all a few years in the past. Why is this all coming to a head now?
I think, and we've talked about it at length, it's this book, like, you know, I think this was the nail in his coffin, so to speak. We've had stories, you know, drip fed, and there's article, you know, 2 pads Andy, like, it's in the papers every other day over here, what's Prince Andrew done next. So when this book came out, of course, we reported on it, and these allegations in Virginia Roberts Giuffre's book we knew about. This wasn't new information, but reading it, and I'm halfway through, and reading it in her own words, it's so confronting. And I wonder, and we talk about here, whether the King has read it or one of his closest advisors, because quite clearly this was the straw that broke the camel's back. This was the line in the sand. And then in terms of the King doing it, This was making headlines when the king was at the Vatican, and this was such a massive moment for him. The two-face, that moment, this was something he's been working towards. He wanted to have this moment with Pope Francis. He couldn't. Pope Francis was too sick and then passed away. So the fact that he has made this a priority to go back so soon after a state visit to Italy, this meant the world to him. And all anyone was talking about was his brother. He was furious. And then the world's media actually got a call up and said, be out at Windsor the night that King Charles comes back to the UK. So everyone thought something was going to happen. In the end, nothing didn't. Nothing happened. There was some talk that the king was going to drive past and read in the Riot Act and basically say, stop doing this. Nothing happened. So then there was talk, okay, what's going to happen here? The fact he did it, I wasn't sure if he would, but I think in many ways, Prince Andrew's protections died with his mother. This was never going to happen when the Queen was alive.
So you think ultimately it was the public pressure? I mean, we saw the king out and about on a walkabout, and he got heckled by just an ordinary member of the public asking him if he had known what Andrew was up to. So do you think that it is literally just the book and the public pressure, and it's finally got too much for the king, and he's just said, right, cut my brother loose?
It was untenable in the end, and you're right, that awful moment, it was awful because he was being screamed at, the king, and this isn't something you see. The royal family are loved and adored, and wherever they go, people cheer for them. So the fact that he was being screamed and yelled at about something so serious as a sex offender, and that was highly embarrassing. And he knew he has so much to do, the king. His agenda was set back by his illness and the fact he needed to take that time off. And you ask anyone who's close to him, his advisors, he's a man on a mission to achieve what he can in that role. But anything he did was starting to be overshadowed by his brother. So it became an untenable situation. We thought perhaps he was going to start the process for him to be stripped of his titles through the parliamentary process, which would have been long, it would have been drawn out. So the fact he used his basically royal privilege and he could do that, it meant he didn't want to drag it through the parliament, he didn't want it to cost taxpayers money, and he wanted it done quickly.
Yeah, I mean, but even then, it was almost like they had to be dragged to that point. The things were kind of drip fed. It's like, well, I'm not going to call myself His Royal Highness. Okay, now I'm not going to call myself the Duke of York. And then finally, we all thought, Prince is a birthright thing. Surely he's not going to lose that. And that seemed to be like the last final straw. Do you think, how much role do you think Prince William has had in this? Because there's also been a lot of talk about photographs from a fairly recent funeral within the royal family, and Andrew walking alongside William, and William almost like blanking his uncle.
That was fascinating. That was the Duchess of Kent's funeral, and everyone was there, and so Andrew and Fergie were there. And when we started to see that image come out of William standing there, he could not look more disgusted by his uncle if he tried. And whether he knew the cameras were on him so he didn't want to engage, or that's just what he thinks of him, and Andrew's trying to share a laugh with him, it was so very clear what he thought of him. And Prince William's had a major role in this. There were reports that, because as the most recent timeline goes, Prince Andrew announced that he would voluntarily stop using his titles. I will no longer use my titles. Then it came, all right, that's not enough. But in the interim period, we were starting to hear that Prince Andrew was even threatening Princess Beatrice and Eugenie to take their titles if they didn't convince their father to go one step further. He's been very much involved in this, and we've started to see Prince William posture himself as what sort of king he's going to be. He's been doing interviews. He's very much starting to take the reins. He won't do that prematurely, but we know that the king is unwell, so the inevitable will happen eventually. And I guess if it didn't happen under King Charles, it was going to happen under Prince William. But they needed to get some clean air, and that's what they could not get until they did this. And whether or not this is giving them clean air, I don't know. There's still articles every single day.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Funny you should mention that, Jess. You're there in London. You have a front row seat to the British press. You can walk past the newsagents and read the headlines, but you're also alongside the press at a lot of these events. What kind of role has the British press played in this? How are they treating this whole saga?
British press here, and there's what's called a royal rota, and they travel with the king, and they have a very good relationship with the palace. It's not back in the days of Diana where it was palace versus the press. They work in unison, and so the palace very much give them the heads up when something needs to have the heads up. But all the royal correspondents were very clear on the fact that it's starting to overshadow the king's important work and work that he's passionate about, and that was infuriating him. I mean, everyone just thinks it's extraordinary. Prince Andrew just continued to turn up to things. Last Easter, he turned up. He was there. He didn't do the Christmas walkabout, but he came to Easter, and then all of a sudden, the story isn't the royals are at their Easter walkabout, it's Prince Andrew is at the walkabout. So it's been an extraordinary time, and this is the closest thing to exile that you get in this modern monarchy. They would like him to go away, but he will go as far as Sandringham.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I loved that headline, the Prince, the Andrew formerly known as Prince. I mean, whoever came up with that title, that was gold. We mentioned again, I just rewatched that A Very Royal Scandal. It's on Prime Video here in Australia at the moment. It's great. But what I loved about it was it just sort of portrayed Andrew as someone who was very entitled and very arrogant and sort of like blaming everyone else around him for the mess that he found himself in. And there was this one line where he said to someone, well, what am I supposed to do now? And the answer was, live with the consequences of your actions. Now, obviously, this is a fictional dramatization. We don't know how accurate all of that is. But, I mean, it feels accurate, doesn't it? It feels like that's how he's kind of handled this whole scenario.
Yeah. I speak to all of this having never met Prince Andrew, obviously, but I have had lengthy discussions with people who have, and people who have reported on him and the royal family for quite some time. And I think it's just so telling that he signs off every media statement with, I deny all the allegations against me. He's never apologised. There are reports that he really pushed to have that paragraph. And this was to me, the most remarkable part of that statement from the King when he announced that he'd be stripping Andrew of his titles, that he and the Queen stand by the victims of sexual abuse. He went there. They weren't sure if the King would go there, but he did. And the Queen herself has been very upset that Prince Andrew saga would overshadow her work with victims. So there has been reports that Prince Andrew told his brother, I don't want that paragraph in there. So in terms of any sort of, and he denies the allegations, contrition, sympathy, empathy, he hasn't shown one iota of it. So he's held on to Royal Lodge, 44-room mansion, with both hands. He's had to be dragged kicking and screaming to every development in this.
So what does happen now? When does he leave Royal Lodge? Where does he go when he leaves Royal Lodge? He's no longer a prince. Does that mean he loses, all the entitlements, all the security? Like, what does life look like for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor?
He's a commoner. He's a commoner like you and I, but the realistic fact of it is he's still the brother of the King, so he will need to have protections. That will all be footed by the King. So they've said he's moving to a property on Sandringham. They've said he's not doing that till January. And why is that significant? He won't be there for Christmas, which is where all the royal family go for Christmas. They do that royal walkabout. No one's going to see him at Christmas to overshadow yet another event for the royal family. He'll be out at Sandringham by January. They've said he'll move out of Royal Lodge in Windsor as soon as is practical. We don't know if that's happened. It would highly be unlikely it's happened without any cameras on it. But they will want him out there as discreetly as possible. We understand Fergie is still there, whether she's going to go with him to Sandringham and live in a property. The palace has said she needs to make her own arrangements. So there was all this talk that she wanted to have Adelaide Cottage and he wanted Frogmore. That's not happening. So anything, I mean, he can't work, obviously. He's not going to become a labourer down at
Oh,
the
God,
local
could you imagine?
whatever. I mean, I'm not sure he'd know how to open a toolbox. So he'll be funded by his brother for the rest of his days. And they will be telling him, be there and we don't want to hear from you.
I've even read
In a nice
reports.
way.
Yeah, I've read reports that he might end up somewhere like Abu Dhabi, living in a compound thanks to one of his contacts. I mean, could that be likely?
If I were him, I'd get as far away as possible. Whether he has the personal reflection to realise that that's what he needs to do, or whether or not he indeed thinks maybe this will blow over and it'll all be okay. And from what we understand, that's what he has been like, this too shall pass. This isn't passing. This is the end of the road in terms of titles. So I don't know. He clearly has a lot of contacts, and he got those contacts through his connection with Jeffrey Epstein. So he may do. I feel for Princess Beatrice and Eugenie.
Me too.
They continue to live here. They continue to do really, really good charity work. They're married with children, and they will forever be tarred by what their father has said and done, and they need to continue to have a relationship. I mean, they were at Christmas in Sandringham. Whether they go this year after what's happened, wait to see.
It'd be very hard to reconcile, a father that with allegations and events such as they have transpired. So yeah, I agree with you. It must be very difficult for them.
There's a paragraph in the book too, Jane, which just Virginia Giuffre says that Prince Andrew said to her, he asked how old she was, and he said, my daughters are of very similar age. So that just brings it home, that he was comparing this woman to his daughters. It's sordid, to say the least.
And of course, all of these allegations from Virginia Giuffre in this book are coming from beyond the grave, because we know that she took her own life earlier in the year. So her family have said that, this is an ordinary American girl bringing down a British prince. That statement from them.
She gave an interview saying, "I'll never be silenced." And this is the remarkable thing of it, because she is dead. She's no longer here. And she is not silenced at all. And I truly do believe it was the release of her posthumous memoir that was the nail in the coffin. That was the bridge too far for Prince Andrew and for the King. So in many ways, she did bring down the prince.
Absolutely. There is one thing that he still retains, though, and that is the fact that he is I think it's the 8th in line in terms of the succession to the throne. I mean, it is such a long shot of him ever taking over. Do you think the reports about, people being cranky trying to kick him out of the line of succession, is it worth it? Is that even an issue?
A lot of things need to have gone wrong for Prince Andrew to have a shot at taking the throne. I don't think that will happen, because that does need to go through Parliament. So yet again, that'd be a drawn out process. So no, he will almost definitely stay the 8th in line to the throne, knowing that he'll never get anywhere close to it. But I guess that, that can be one thing he can hold on to.
Yeah. Finally, Jess, I mean, do you think, if this is the end of the road in terms of the things he can be stripped of and the things that can be taken away from him, is this a line drawn in the sand now? Can the monarchy finally say, we've put the Andrew issue to bed and let's talk about something else?
That's what they want. We've had conversations here again, does the King know something we don't? Is that why he took that next step? Is there more to come? Heaven forbid there's more to come and they've found out and they've tried to get ahead of it. It will depend on what comes next. Does he go to Sandringham? Does he sit there and does he stay out of the spotlight, and if this is the worst of it, and I hope it is in terms of the allegations because they're so horrific, then maybe it is. But it's the royal family, and I tell you that, like
it's never boring.
They love a good scandal.
They do. But you know, look,
they keep us in a job.
Jess, the King is doing his best to get us to talk about anything else, and what better way to do that than tonight, Sir David Beckham, hey?
I was thinking, this is the first time we've seen the King since the Andrew stuff. No one mentioned that. No one mentioned that because we were too busy googling Sir David Beckham. How does he get 10 times more handsome now that he's a Sir? I mean, it's just, yeah, it was very good timing. That was locked in months ago, his investiture ceremony.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't, things weren't moved around. It was locked in, but perfect timing for the royal family because...
So do you think maybe someone said, oh, look, we've got David Beckham penciled in on this date, so we've got to ditch Andrew before then, so that we've got the perfect, you know, like, what's the word? I don't know, stopper, to get people to talk about something new.
A soft landing.
Yes.
Look, no, because I think so much goes into this. But I mean, I also, side note, I felt there were quite a few people who were knighted yesterday in Windsor. And, you know, I felt for them because imagine having your big day on the day David Beckham is being knighted. Oh, yeah. Sorry, no one's talking about that. But I tell you what they would have factored in is Prince William's trip. Because this Earthshot Prize is very dear to his heart. He created it. This is very, very important to him. He wouldn't have wanted the Andrew headlines dominating this trip, which he's on now.
Okay. All right, so we cut the brother and the uncle loose. We knight Sir David Beckham. We go off to Brazil and we talk about the people who are doing all the good things to help the world's environment, and suddenly, you know, all is well in the royal family.
Cross our fingers that Andrew just stays silent.
Stay silent.
It's been extraordinary when you think at one point this man could have been the monarch.
I know.
And when you get down into the nitty-gritty and the weeds of the allegations and the decisions he made, it's horrific. And, you know, I think William's face said it all. He was disgusted by his uncle, and again, allegations he denies, but if even half of it's true, then he should probably just go sit in Sandringham for a while.
So Jess, this is a question without notice, because, you know, on this podcast we like to talk about the news and talk about the things that we don't always get to talk to you about on the Today Show, because, you know, we talk to you for a minute or something. You are, as you mentioned,
30 seconds. We get in trouble if we talk for a minute.
Okay. So you're coming to the end of your time in London. I don't know if you've kept a tally of how many royal stories you've reported on, but I'm guessing it's a lot. Just give our viewers a sense of, like, you know, what are the highs and the lows of royal reporting? What do you love about it? And, you know, what can be a little on the more tedious side?
Palace as a machine is extraordinary. It's very, I'm not going to say difficult to deal with, but the PR machine behind the palace is incredible. So that can be a little bit tedious when you're trying to get information and you're trying to... So the King came to Australia House a few weeks ago, and the restrictions on where we could stand, how we could stand, you can never turn your back to the monarch if you're in the same room as him. It's very controlled. So that would be the trickier side. But the good side, I mean, no one does pomp and pageantry like the royal family, and it's every big royal event, be it Trooping the Colour, VE Day, they do it very, very well. And there are pinch me moments when you're standing outside Buckingham Palace and the golden carriage goes past and there's Kate and there's Louis, and it's still majestic for so many of us. And I think Australians at home still have such an affinity with the royal family. And I say still because, you know, many thought that may have pulled back a bit when the Queen passed away, but I don't think it has at all. And, you know, it's it's fun, you know. They're
Yeah.
prince and princesses, and they do good work too.
It's true, it's true. I followed a few royal tours around, and I guess the overriding sense I get from them is just people are happy. People are happy to see them, they're excited to meet them, and it's just kind of like a good vibe.
It is, and you know, you talk about how many stories I've done. I think it'd be on par with how many stories I've done on the Middle East and Ukraine. And so whenever I do get the chance to do a royal story, it's nice, and it's normally talking about charity work, and it's normally talking about Kate, and people are screaming for Kate, and Kate's touched a baby, and what's Kate wearing, and you know, she's got Diana's pearls on. So it tends to be an escape, and it's pretty pictures. So I often very much like the day when I'm on a royal story.
Oh, Jess, it is great to talk to you for longer than normal. We love your work, and thank you so much for joining us on Today's Take.
They'd be wrapping me up on the Today Show right now, well and truly.
Cut, we've heard enough. Not here, Jess, we love you.
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you, and thank you for listening. If you've liked what you've heard, please give us a like, a subscribe, leave a comment. It all helps. And join us again here next week for another episode of Today's Take. I'm Jane Azzopardi. Until then, I will see you bright and early with the rest of the Today team. Have a great day.